As we said before, we do allow for questions here at the Independence Reformed Bible Church. We do believe that this is consistent with the scriptures, especially 1 Corinthians 14, which we'll study later, much later. Who has a question?
This week I was involved in a lot of discussions with other abolitionists in regards to idols within specifically the pro-life movement. We were speaking about being unequally yoked with other professing believers, both Catholic and Protestant. And we were talking about specifically one gentleman was speaking to a pastor who said we can't offend people that might put them away from the cross, and so we should just keep the main thing, and not talk about abortion, because then they'll think a woman doesn't have a choice, and then they won't want to hear about Christ. And then we were also talking about being unequally yoked. Many times at the mill, you will work with Catholics. They're the ones who generally go to the abortion clinic. Sometimes you will find a Catholic who thinks the gospel is central, but more often than not, the Catholics are there in order to pile up their good works. So, in terms of that, what idols do you think that we ought to be taking an axe to?
Actually, 1 Corinthians deals with that extensively, because Paul's going to take on that question of eating meat offered to idols, and he's talking about fellowshipping. One of the things that we often do when we talk about working together, say with unbelievers, I think we forget about that word yoked too often. What does it mean to be yoked? Well, when you're yoked with someone else, you're going the same place no matter what. Now, let's back up a little bit and ask, hey, if I'm, fixing the flat tire, my tire went flat, and a Buddhist comes along and wants to help me fix my flat tire, should I allow him to do it? After all, I don't want to be unequally yoked. Well, if he'll do it my way, he can help me. My way is jack up the car, take off the old tire, loosen up the nuts, take off the old tire, put the new one on, tighten the nuts, jack down the car, and drive away. That's my way of doing it. His way may be, let's just meditate. Now I said Buddhist, but I should have said Hindu. Now for a Hindu, all life is an illusion, right? Well, how do you fix an illusion? Well, you meditate. Well, why not fix a flat tire that way? Why not? After all, the tire's an illusion, the flat tire's an illusion, the full tire's an illusion, the car's an illusion, I'm an illusion. So let's fix your tire by meditating. Well, no, now we can't work together. So ultimately, you and I, when we do any work at all, have to be able to say, you know what, this is the right thing to do. And anybody who wants to help me do it can. But anybody who doesn't want to help me do it can't. And anybody who wants to do it the wrong way can't help me either. Now, when it comes to this horrifying, bloody record that we have called abortion here in this country, and it is horrifying, and it is bloody. Hey, you know what? If someone wants to stand with me for that outside of the clinic, I'm not yoked to that person. If they want to be with me, but if they want to do it the wrong way, maybe then we just cannot work together. Now, as far as the idea of offending people is concerned, I hope. I hope by now we've understood in all of our Bible study here at the Independence Reformed Bible Church, I hope by now that we've begun to realize that Paul and Christ are pretty offensive people. Christ, offensive enough to get himself killed. Paul, get himself kicked out. That doesn't mean that everybody has to be offensive all the time. Apollos appears to have been a very capable preacher, very capable man. And I've said before, if I'm Paul, I'm kind of jealous of Apollos. Paul does all the hard work, gets the churches started. Kind of looks like Apollos. He came to Corinthians after Corinth, after Paul was there. It looks like he just kind of sweeps in and teaches everybody anything. And we don't have any record of Apollos ever being kicked out of anywhere. We don't have any record of Apollos even being persecuted at all. So we don't cause problems just to cause problems at all. Apollos looks like he skated through a little bit. Looks that way. So we don't do it for that reason. But we don't back off from what's actually true. And that's what Paul's doing here. Paul is saying, look, I am not trying to sound smart to people who don't believe in Christ. I'm not looking for your approval here. You see, oftentimes we're out to like reason and so forth, and there's a place for that, no doubt about it. But ultimately, we have to be out to expose wickedness. Because that's what the cross of Christ does. In the end, it exposes wickedness on every level. Because it says loudly and clearly, this is why people don't like it. It says loudly and clearly that the wicked things that you've done deserve this kind of punishment right here. This is what your punishment deserves. This cross. You just don't want to think that our punishment should be that bad. We're a lot more comfortable with a few Hail Marys. And some penance here and there. Who has the next question? Yes, ma'am.
Actually, can I have a comment?
Sure.
A question? Okay. This goes back to when you were talking about the people living in mud huts. And the reason that they do is because they rejected Christ. And I just wanted to share a story that my sister, who's a nurse, she lived in Afghanistan for 4 years. And they would travel to remote villages. And she said there was one village that was up in the mountains, and it was only accessible for like 4 months of the year because it was snowed in otherwise. And she said it's been like that for thousands of years, and nobody has invented the snowshoe. That village, nobody. And so I just thought that was interesting, and she was just saying it's because Islam is so oppressive. And and if you look in the history of inventions, I mean, a lot of inventions were in a free Christian society. And it just promotes a lot of creativity, so that was my comment.
Yeah, that's the case, and that can be, and I brought the book with me, I was going to quote from it and then decided not to. Alvin Schmidt's book, How Christianity Changed the World. And it's no accident that the inventions to make people's lives easier and more pleasant, they pretty much all come from the Christian West. Very hard to think of, yes, you mentioned Islam. And Robert Spencer pointed out that they didn't even, the thief comes with the steal, kill, and destroy. And I can't think of a better description of Islam than that. Stealing, killing, destroying, for hundreds and hundreds of years. Robert Spencer pointed out that the Muslims couldn't even invent a mosque. They actually had to copy their mosque ideas from the Eastern Orthodox Church. You ever notice that? Those Eastern Orthodox basilicas look a lot like mosques. You ever notice that? And sometimes until you get really close, you can't tell which is which. That's because they copied that. They couldn't even come up with the car bomb. They had to borrow that off the Irish. Can't invent much of anything. Steal, kill, destroy. Doesn't sound very inventive. Yes, John?
We talked in here about not being able to know God, not being able to understand. And yet in Romans, we talked about how the knowledge of God is innate. It's in us, in all of us. Do you want to talk to reconciling those two?
Sure. And certainly in Romans, Paul goes on to say, he says they do know God because they know right from wrong. But then later on he says, well, how shall they hear without a preacher? And what he's really saying there is, look, they know enough to know what's right and wrong, but they continually do not care to know the God who tells them what's right and wrong. And they have to be told, and they have to be told through a preacher.
So it's a revelation.
It is God's revelation of His Son, Jesus Christ. Because no one gets saved without that. And what they have is they have enough revelation to condemn them, but they do not have enough to save them. And before we get into a discussion of what's fair, let's remember that God's not fair. He's just. John, what are we doing next? I guess you're leading the scene next.
Thank you.
Yep.